Welcome to another coding tutorial, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to make the spinning graphics using the masking technique. Image masking is a technique where you hide or you show a portion of an image based on the pattern that you create, and we're going to do it using a method within the p5 image class called mask. So let's see how we can do that. We're going to start by uploading the image, and we can do that by coming to this arrow here, click the plus sign, and then click upload file, and this is where you're going to drag and drop your image inside. And then once your file is uploaded, my file is called spinning450px.png, and that is because I have made an image of the size 450 by 450 pixel. So now I'm going to start by creating a variable. Let's call it img for image, and then I'm going to write a function called preload. This function is going to allow us to preload the image onto the sketch before we call the setup or the draw function. Then we want to set img to another function called load image. And then inside here, we're going to give it the path of our image. In my case here, it's the name of the file. Make sure that you put it inside a quotation mark. So spinning 450px.png. Let's click run to make sure that everything is loaded properly. And it is. All right, so now I can just do image and then the name of my file, 0,0, and these are the x and y coordinates of the top left corner of where I want to place the image file. Let's click run. And as you can see here, the size of my image is exactly the same size of the size of the canvas, so I don't need to do any resizing. But if you need to resize your image, you can do it easily by just put the name of your file and then dot resize, and you can provide two arguments of the desired width and height that you want. Let's say you want it 200 by 200. And as you can see here, it's resized to the new desired dimensions. But let's say that you know that you want it at a specific width, but you don't know what is the proportional height that you need. You don't actually need to provide the second argument as the desired height. You can actually just put in 0, and by doing that, it actually is going to proportionately resize the image for you. But because the size of my image is already at the same size as my canvas, I can just delete this line of code. All right, so now let's look at how we can use the mask method. So first, I'm going to actually create another variable. Let's call it mask image. And I'm basically going to, inside setup, set mask image to be equals to img.get. And by using this get method without providing any arguments, it actually returns the pixel information of the entire image for me. So instead of doing img here, I'm just going to do mask image. And it is still the same because I'm basically just copying whatever is on the image to this new mask image variable. And I want to do that because I don't want to edit the original image file. All right, so now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create another variable. Let's call it mask. And I'm going to set it to a function called create graphics. And basically, the create graphics is going to take in the width and height dimensions, which I'm going to give it width and height so that it's the same size as my canvas. And create graphics basically allows me to create a separate canvas that is not being displayed. So if I click run, you don't see anything yet, but it does give me an error. Mask. Okay, so let's just call it M because mask is reserved. All right. So now, how about we comment this out, and then I'm going to do the same thing by using the function called image and then just try to draw out this new graphics. And this should be global. All right, so you don't see anything yet because this new graphics or new canvas, I haven't drawn anything on top. And as I mentioned earlier, image masking is a technique where you can hide or you can show a portion of an image based on the pattern that you create. So right now, I'm going to create that pattern in a shape of an ellipse. For us to draw anything on top of this new graphics, M, what we need to do is that we need to put in m dot and then the function that we're going to write. So it's going to be the same thing as how we create a circle or an ellipse. we're going to use the function called ellipse, and then I'm going to give it 4 arguments. The first 2 are going to be the x and y coordinate of the middle of the circle, and then the diameters, the width and the height of the circle. So let's do, how about 100 by 100? And then if I click run now you do see this circle here. Let's make it a little bit bigger. And now that we have this pattern, we're basically going to mask the new image here, mask image, using this mask or this ellipse here. And we can do that by first putting the image file, which is mask image dot the method called mask, and then it is going to be of the shape M, right? And then if I click run, you only see this circle because we're showing the mask itself, but now I want to show actually the mask image. Ta-da! Let's make it a little bit bigger. That's pretty cool. And then now let's uncomment this one, and instead of mask image, I'm just going to put in the original image. All right, so you don't see anything because they're the same photos, right? Because the masking part is actually of the same size as the background. I'm going to use a function called filter, and I want to make the image, the background, blurry, so we can use the filter blur. And then you need to provide the second argument of how blurry you want it to be. I'm not actually sure what's the range, but you can just experiment. So if you do 1, it's a bit blurry. 2, not bad. How about we do 3? All right, that looks pretty good. So now that we know how to use the mask method, let's try to experiment with what we can do with this. So first, actually, I want to put all of this code inside a class. So let's come to this arrow here, click the plus sign, and then click create file. I'm going to create a new JavaScript file. Let's call it mask.js. And then before we start writing a class, let's reference the file, go to index.html here. Then you want to copy this line of code, then change the name of this to the name of your new file, so mask.js. All right, so now we're ready to write class. So I'm going to call this class mask, and then inside the constructor function, I'm going to provide 2 parameters, x and y. This dot x equals to x, and then this dot y equals to y. Actually, how about we also do r for the radius? All right, and then now I'm going to write a method called display. Let's go back to sketch.js. So we want actually all of this to be inside the constructor function. All right, so we're gonna put in this dot mask image, but then the mask can just be a local variable here. So let m, and then this 300 will be this dot r times 2, this dot r times 2, and then this will be this dot mask image dot mask in parentheses m. All right, and then now in terms of displaying the image, we can just do this. And this has to be this dot mask image. All right, so let's just try to create this exact thing, but using the class mask. So I'm going to, we can delete this. We can delete this. All right, so actually let's just call it circle. Yep, and then inside setup, let's do circle equals to a new mask object, right? And we want it to be at the center as well. So just do width divided by 2 and then height divided by 2. And then the size here will be 150, comma 1. We just need 1 for the radius. And the reason I put 150 is because we're doing this dot r times 2, right? So the diameter will be 300. And then inside here, all we need to do is we need to call the display method. And we should get the same thing. Yep, perfect. So now let's create multiple circles. So let's start with changing this into an array. And then how about we create another variable called num. Let's set it to 3 to start with. And then inside setup, I'm going to write a for loop that goes from let I equals to 0 to I less than num, I plus plus. And now we're going to create a bunch of circles, 3 to be exact. The x and y location will still be at width divided by 2 and then height divided by 2. But then the radius, we want to vary that, right? So let's just put in r, and we're going to set r to be equals to, so I want to calculate it based on the number of circles that we're going to create, right? Which is num. So we can actually do it based on the width, right? Width divided by num, and then how about we multiply it by I? And here we need a for loop as well. And then we're going to call the display method. Let's try that. Okay, I think, right, because this is the radius, we need to divide width here by 2. All right, but we only see one circle instead of 3, and that is because we multiply it by I. Actually, we multiply it by I, and that's why there is 1 with the radius equals to 0. So if we do I plus 1, you can see that the biggest one is now bigger, but you only see one circle. So actually what you want to do is, instead of doing I plus 1, you want to have the smallest one be on top. Actually, we can't really see because they might be the same images on top of each other. How about we go back to mask.js first, and what I want to do is I want to create borders for each of these circles. So let's do ellipse at location width divided by 2 and height divided by 2, and the radius is this dot r times 2 and this dot r times 2. And then let's do no fill and stroke of the color. Why don't we start with red so we can see brightly, and let's do stroke weight of, how about 3. All right, so as you can see here, the biggest one is the one that is on top, but we want it to be at the bottom, right? So what we can do is, instead of multiplying it by I plus 1, we want to do num minus I. All right, so now we have 3 circles. And as you change the numbers here, you get multiple circles. All right, so now if I don't actually draw out these red borders, you cannot actually see these multiple circles. So another technique that you can do is, what if we rotate it a little bit, right? So let's go back to mask.js, and then I'm going to create an extra variable called angle. And then we're going to set this dot angle to be equals to angle. And now we go back to sketch.js, and here let's set angle to be equals to, so I want it to be based on the number of circles that I have as well. So we can do, first actually I want to change the angle mode to degrees. So let angle equals to, how about we just move each one slightly relative to each other. So we just do 15 divided by num, and then times, you want to do, you can times it by I, so there's one that is not going to be rotated at all. So let's just do that, I, and then now we're going to provide angle as the last argument here. And it probably doesn't do anything yet because we have not actually put it anywhere in display. So I'm actually going to do it here. So let's do rotate by this dot angle. Whoa. Do you see? It's not rotated in the way that I want, and a few things are incorrect right now. So the first thing is Actually, how about I come here first? I'm going to comment out the background, and let's set the number to, let's do 2. All right, and let's do +1 here so you can actually see that they're both not correct. All right, so as you can see here, it actually is rotated around this point here, the top left corner. To use the rotate function, you want it to rotate around an origin point. And if you want it to rotate around itself, what you can do is that you can actually use the translate function, translate the origin point to the middle of your image, and then you can use the rotate function. So we're going to go back to math.js, and then we're going to use the translate function before the rotate function. And we want to translate it by width divided by 2 and height divided by 2. And I'm going to comment out the borders first. Then now let's see what happens. It's not what we want again, and that is because right now the image are being drawn based on the anchor point that is at the top left corner of the image file. So we want to also change the image mode to center so that the x and y coordinate, instead of being at the top left corner, now it's going to be in the middle of the image. All right, so one circle is correct, but the other one is not. Whenever we do transformations, we need to think about whether we want to use the functions push or pop or not. So push saves the transformations, and then pop returns it back to the default settings before the next set of transformations are being called. And in this case, we do. So we're going to put in push before the transformation functions and then pop after. And by doing this, the second circle now is being transformed correctly. All right, so if I put this back here, then now it's correct. All right, but if you actually want to put these borders inside the push and pop functions here, so let's do it maybe right before the image here, you also need to make sure that the location of your ellipse is at 0,0 now, because we have translated the origin point to the new location. All right, now what we want to do is, how about we go back here and we create more of them. Perfect. Now I'm going to uncomment these. Oh, and I need to change this to width divided by 2 and height divided by 2 because the image mode is changed to center. All right, and now, actually I don't want these red borders, so I'm going to comment them out. Now I want to spin these. So I'm going to actually write a new method called update, and basically update is going to increment the angle. So let's do it by, how about 1 degree at a time, and let's call circles of I dot update. All right, and as you can see here, they're all rotating together, and that is because of that constant 1 degree at a time. So I don't really want that. So how about I just put in this dot speed here, and I'm going to do this dot speed equals to a random angle value between, how about 0.5 and 1. All right, that looks better. And then now the last thing is, I want it to be kind of like a vinyl, so make it interactive by writing a function called mouse released, and mouse release basically gets called when you release the mouse. So I'm going to also write a Boolean variable, create a Boolean variable called play, set it to false, and then every time we release the mouse, so it's just kind of like you released, I don't know, I don't have a vinyl player, but that's what I imagine how it works. So we're going to set play to whatever it is not. So equals to exclamation point, play. And we're only going to call update if play is true. So if play returns true, we're going to call it. So it's not spinning, and then you press, and you release, and then it's spinning, and then you click, and then you release, then it stops. All right, and before I go, how about I change the size of the biggest one, the size of all of them to be a little bit smaller, so you can just do width here, maybe times it by a specific scale, and let's set that scale to, let's do, how about 0.9. All right. So I'm going to stop here, but as you can see, the masking technique is very powerful because there's so many interesting things that you can do with it, and it is so simple, and you can create different types of masks. This is just one way. Give this one a try.